Hey, I'm Ellecia, your non-monogamous relationship coach. Welcome to the podcast where my friends and I chat about our relationships, enthusiastic non-monogamy, polyamory, swinging, kink, and our lives. You'll get a candid peek into what makes it worth it to live life outside the box. And in case you're still wondering, nope, we're not monogamous. Hey. Welcome to the show. Today I have Alex Cox with me. Alex is eccentric. He's been practicing polyamory since 2018, and he helped build an online polyamorous community during COVID while experiencing multiple breakdowns, seeking therapy for PTSD, getting diagnosed with ADHD, navigating multiple partnerships, parenting, juggling major career decisions, writing poetry, and developing a spiritual practice. He lives in Portland and is building community and being his complete self and enjoying life in all its weirdness. And he's sharing his story with us today. You know, in this world that's filled with like love and loss and unexpected challenges, his journey into polyamory took him to places that he wasn't expecting. But as he took a leap of faith, he soon realized that there's so many rewards, as I'm sure you're finding. I hope you enjoy the show as much as I did. And if you do, please leave us a review. And if you leave a review on one of the many podcast listening places like Apple or Spotify or YouTube or any of the places that let you leave a review, I will probably read it on the air. And if I do read it on the air, you might also win something. Go leave me a review, please. Now we're doing it. Cool.
Good
Hi.
deal. Hi.
Hi, like I have not been talking to you for 5 minutes.
I know we're old friends now, right?
Exactly. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I am excited to chat with you, and welcome.
Thanks for the invitation. It's kind of interesting. You've interviewed a few friends of mine, and you recently had the episode with Christina Dynamite, who's a friend and a co-admin on a local group here in Portland. And she was like, she's always looking for men to interview. And it's like, yeah, I can see why that can be a little bit tough. So, I'm willing to do it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. Yeah. I really enjoyed that episode with her. It was fun. I love it when us like ADHD people get together and we just start chattering at each other and like interrupting each other. It's my favorite. Not great for podcasting, but it's still my favorite.
The tangents that you can go off on just from that alone. And it's funny because I've had to, because recently many of my dates have been with other neurodivergent people. I recently had a dating experience where like I started dating someone who wasn't neurodivergent, and we get like 3-4 dates in, and I'm feeling like the strain in communication. And we go out on another date and we're sitting there talking and we're trying to figure out how our communication style is. And she's like, "You're not asking me any questions." And it's like, I feel like I am, but I'm feeling like I'm having to like pull things out. And I'm like, why am I feeling? Because we're not doing the ping pong. We're not doing the ADHD ping pong of like, oh, there's this in the tangent. So we were missing
and that
each other.
Reminds me.
Exactly. So it's like, oh man, I need to remember that and adjust my communication style when I'm talking with people who are neurotypical. So, lesson learned.
I love that. That I find it really funny when I'm interacting with people that it feels awkward and strained. And I'm like, why aren't we just like sharing stories constantly? Oh, I have to leave space for that.
Yeah. That urge, that little ping of the reminder to shut up and leave a gap.
Yeah. Well, since this is Nope, We're Not Monogamous, I was hoping you would share a little bit about your journey through relationships. Like what? How did you discover polyamory? Are you polyamorous? Or how do you identify for a relationship style?
Identification, labeling, doing these will be common themes because like there's a whole thing about labels in our community, and
Yeah.
labels are important, but then it's also labels when we take them, they can also come to like define what we do. So I've been
Mm-hmm.
working on separating what we do versus like what we are. And some people practice polyamory as a practice that they do. Some people it's their identity. For me, it's my identity and what I do. So, and I, like many people, I didn't start out this journey polyamorous. We started out ethically non-monogamous. And to take a step back, I'm married. So my wife and I have been married since 2014. We had a wild weekend where, we had been dating for 3, 4 years. We had been engaged for about 6 months. We got a promotion. We were living in North Carolina. We got married on a Saturday and boarded a plane with our two cats and ourselves on a Tuesday and moved to California. So completely across the country from family, all of that good stuff. So and that started our marriage. And up till then, we had been monogamous. So it had been cool. And of course, you move out to California, you become a hippie liberal and all that good stuff. And but what ended up happening with us was sadly a lot more difficult. In 2015, my wife got sick. She got sick with a condition called Guillain-Barré syndrome, and this is a condition where like the myelinated sheath on your nervous system starts getting eaten by your immune system, and from your extremities inward, you get paralyzed. So my wife, for about 6 months in 2015, she was paralyzed in a hospital for a couple months in rehab, and then she was in a wheelchair, and then she through 2015, her healing from that, she went from wheelchair to walker to cane into early 2016.
Wow.
2016, you'd think we'd be calm, we'd be recovering through that whole position. Like when you're married, you're not sure if your partner is ever going to walk again. You have conversations, and one of the conversations is like, listen, we haven't, I know my wife had said, I know you're not like there, like I understand if you, and at the time I was kind of like, no, I don't want to talk about like, I can take care of myself, and do what I need to do without seeking anything outside of our marriage,
Yeah.
for right now. 2016, it was my turn. So 2016, I had had an arrhythmia for about 20 years, and it worsened as I got older. And in May 2016, I had this like big event where, my wife called 911, went to the ER. They gave me the paddles. So I got the like nice paddle shock to revert into a normal rhythm. And then at the end of the month, I had a surgery that corrected and found this condition called Wolff Parkinson White syndrome. So for you medical people in the audience, I've already mentioned two really rare conditions that like rare, most people don't have. Wolff Parkinson White syndrome is like an extra electrical pathway around your heart. So, I could have died from that in any point in the first 40 years of my life. People just suddenly die from it. So, get on the other side of that. And that's 2015, 2016, and of course, because we're somewhat masochistic, I think both of us, we decided that we wanted to have a kid. So by July 2016, my wife had already gotten medically cleared. I was learning how to like live with a regular heart, and we conceived our son Zephram. And he was born in April 2017. So 2017, we were going through the new parent stuff and just like and all of this. And through 2015, 2016, 2017, you know, uh, my wife and I like I always knew from the beginning that we were going to be married. Like when we met in 2010, that was kind of like something I knew that would happen. But our romantic relationship didn't really recover. And you go through a lot as new parents, you go through a lot going through health issues. We had codependency, we had a caretaker relationship. So in by I think April 2018, I was pretty feeling it. Our romantic relationship, our sexual relationship hadn't recovered. And there were some other things just going on with myself of, holy cow, I'm a parent of a 1-year old. There's all, I have this new lease on life that I haven't had for 20 years where I can like go out and not worry about my heart, going into another rhythm. I started getting out and hiking and feeling better. And with that, it's also like, oh wow, my libido is like picked up immeasurably. So, to be honest, when I did some research because I remember that conversation my wife and I had when she was in the hospital, and I was kind of like, maybe she's open to it. So let's have that
Yeah.
conversation and let's do some research. And I did that conversation terribly. Uh, I I took some bad advice from Reddit, and I went to her and I was like, "Hey, I would like to try non-monogamy. I would like to go out, have sex, and I want us to still be married, and I need this for my happiness."
Uh-huh.
And it was not presented in a very ethical way. My wife
Uh-huh.
was put under pressure to allow this to happen, and she said, to her grace, she said yes, provided that we get couples therapy.
Oh,
So yeah, so it's like
I love that.
thankfully somebody at some point had turned me on to polyfriendly.org. And I went on there and we found a really great couples counselor in San Jose in the Alameda, who I credit with saving our marriage, and keeping us married. Um, so we started couples counseling. I started seeing other people, meeting people, and one of the first people I met was my first poly partner who lives here in Portland. So we were in the Bay Area.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a really good thing. That was a blessing. And this first poly partner, um, really just kind of you know, did some unique things. And I want to put a pin in that and give a pause if you have any questions or anything there before we kind of move into that phase. But that's how we got started.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. I love that. Totally relatable, the medical things. My husband and I, when right before we got married, actually, he had a very similar heart thing. He's had several cardioversions and a couple of heart surgeries, and we were non-monogamous the whole time. We've been non-monogamous the whole time we've been together for about 10 years now. But I understand that caretaker role. Like, how do you maintain romance and like passion when you're also like dealing with doctors and caretaking and like just like, here, let me help you.
Absolutely.
Ah,
It's there is a whole psychology behind it. Thankfully, like there was a woman I knew through a local science fiction community who was a caretaker for her husband. And while my wife was going through all of her illness, she just kept checking in on me and giving me solid advice. And like some of her advice was take care of yourself, go
yeah,
out, spend time, invest a bit in yourself as you're doing this because you're running a marathon. You're not doing a sprint.
yeah,
So and that turned out to be really good advice.
yeah,
She helped me out a lot. And my wife went through so much. Like I cannot understate how much my wife went through. Like
mm,
it's incredible her will to learn to walk again and,
yeah.
and recover from that.
I I I wish more people would take that bit of advice for all the things in relationships. Like,
Yes,
take care of
we can
yourself,
get
go
to
do
that.
your own thing, be your own person, and don't be completely intertwined with this person that you're naturally drawn to be really intertwined with.
Exactly, exactly. And it's one of those things when we talk about breaking down monogamy,
Yeah,
what level of monogamy is like healthy interdependence and what level is codependence. And then when we get into polyamorous relationships, how do we break down that line between interdependence expectations from monogamy and interdependence in varying levels and types of partnerships in polyamory?
yeah, yeah, and it's so hard to figure out like what that looks like. Like, we don't have a lot of examples of that, so a lot of people are left going like, is it me? Is it you? Is there something wrong here? Am I doing this wrong? Are you doing this wrong? Which one of us is being an asshole?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I default to me. I and
Right.
at any given time, like if just given my personality, my history and everything, like if there's a question of who's being the asshole here, I start with me and then go from there. And that's just a good general rule. Like like
Yeah,
like you can't control other people, but you can look at yourself and your own actions and you can try and get different perspectives and listen to other people's perspectives on how they view you and that can help you like answer that question first before you have other conversations.
Yeah, totally. That's what I tell my clients all the time is start with assuming positive intent. Like if this is someone who loves you, let's assume that they aren't intentionally trying to harm you,
Yeah.
right? Like they're
Yep.
probably doing their best. So assume that unless there's someone who's intentionally trying to harm you and then like let's do something else.
Oh yeah, there's a phrase I've been learning. Okay, so let me pause it, and we probably should have started this at introduction, but I am not a therapist or counseling professional. Please, like any advice that I have, I am a regular dude who has been living and going through stuff, and I think I think we all need professional help. I
Yeah.
think developing community relationships with just average people who are going through stuff, I think that's critical too, because we learn and we get support from the community, our partners, our people, and I think that that's an important thing, and that's one of the reasons why I came on because it's like I don't have anything to sell. I don't have anything that I'm like putting up. I'm just a regular guy out here in the community that just from circumstances has ended up talking with a lot of people and interacting with a lot of people who are non-monogamous and polyamorous. So that's why I wanted to come on here and speak.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
Yeah,
community is such an important piece.
yeah, yep.
So important.
What the phrase though that I was starting to mention, and as a therapist, I'm sure it's unconditional positive regard
Unconditional.
is the term, and
Okay.
and it's this concept that apparently is taught to some therapists and some counselors of how you can separate um the things people do from judgment about who someone is. And
Okay.
when I hear that phrase, and I'm sure many of the listeners, when I said it, are already have locked up on that first word, unconditional,
Mhm.
because unconditional is a challenge, and it is not something that I can do. I try to do it with everybody I meet, but unconditional, I have conditions. I have past trauma that I will judge people from. There's experience and there's things where I just lock up and I say, I can't deal with that, but generally, I try everyone I meet, I try to have some sort of positive regard for. I try to find something, even if they're being brusque or aggressive, I try to find something likable about that person. Because every person that you meet, everyone has somebody that they love, has people who love them, has friends, regardless of what they've done, there's something there, or who you think they are,
Mm,
there's something there that you can find to relate to, and that
yeah.
often can make the difference with yourself in how that interaction goes.
Unconditional positive regard. I love that. That's a real thing.
Yeah, that's a yeah, and when I
Yeah.
first read about it, I was like, "Oh, wow," it was kind of like a coming home. It was like, this is what I've kind of like all the work I've done the last few years on myself, this is kind of part of what it's led to, like, getting this concept, so
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
but the beginning
Oh,
of that path was
uh-huh.
meeting my first poly partner.
Yeah. Tell me about that.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
curious.
so yeah. Met her online, and, yeah, she was, a little bit younger, which, there's different thoughts and attitudes about age and things like that, so, generally, I try to date within, like, plus or minus 10 years and things like that. This particular person, she's still in my life now, and it's a pretty interesting story, but she had been polyamorous since she was a teenager. She was well
Mm,
practiced, well versed, very experienced in poly and non-monogamy. She was with her nesting partner, who's now her husband, and she blessed me with her or poly starter pack. So, because everybody has one, it's like when you start getting into it, what is that collection of books, podcasts, just things to learn about that is the intro starter pack to polyamory. Common one is the ethical slut.
yep.
So she gave me the ethical slut.
That was my
She
first
also
one.
recommended the jealousy workbook.
Yep.
And then the other book that she recommended was the Four Agreements. Um,
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, um, the jealousy workbook, it was kind of funny because that one I kind of needed the least.
Hmm.
In high school, in college, I'm 45 years old, so I'll go ahead and say my age here. But I'm 45, and I grew up in rural Virginia, like a small town of 6,000 people in the mountains of southwestern Virginia. And my first early relationships in high school, I was extremely jealous. I was jealous. I was controlling. I was a conservative. Those people do exist. It's a valid thing. And I was extremely jealous, and that led to a lot of stress. It led
Yeah.
to a lot of anger, control, just really toxic stuff. That even then, I kind of felt like, man, this is bad. And that relationship went on and off for over 5 years. And one of the ways that it kind of started to end, because it wasn't really the end of it, but the beginning of the end was I'd found out that she cheated for like months, and I found out in a really bad way. Like I kind of walked in on them and it was like a whole thing and it led to this really tense moment. And then afterward, I found out dude had a gun that night. So I
Oh
could have been
shit.
shot.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things where it's like, you know, is any of this worth getting killed over? And when you look at like the violence, when you look at like all the aggression and stuff like that that happens, a lot of it's, people, a lot of it is like this scorned lover kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And I went off to college. I did 2 years of community college and then I went off to my university. And I spent that year, I didn't really date a lot of people. I spent a lot of time just kind of like thinking through this jealousy thing because
Mm.
I knew I didn't want to carry that forward in my life. And so I kind of broke it down early. It's like what is important for me in a relationship. And keep in mind this is like I'm 19, 20 in a dorm room in Kentucky trying to figure this out on my own. And what it came down to is the choice. I wanted someone who showed the choice to be with me. There's no amount
Hmm.
of control that you can exert over another person to be with you. I mean, we see it all the time. Like people LoJack their partners on Wi-Fi, or on their phones, or they put cameras up in their homes, or things like that. Essentially, you're building prisons for your partners at that point. Like if you can't trust somebody, where is that? So I
Yeah, I
figured
had
out
that
in an early.
experience.
Oh man, eh,
My first marriage ended because there were cameras in my home.
oh my gosh, I
Woo!
am that is terrible, and
It's
and sadly, that's a too
terrifying.
common story,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I got into a relationship in my early 20s where I had met a girl and, she told me that she was dating somebody else. I was like, "Cool." And I met another girl and I told the first girl like, "Hey, I'm dating this other person." And this is, probably 2001, 2002. And just like the communication around that felt natural.
Yeah.
And we went several months like both dating these other people, both seeing each other. There was a lot of emotion and love there, and we're still friends like 20 years after. But I look at that. I look back at that relationship from unpacking jealousy then and developing that communication style just between me and this other person. That was my first ethically non-monogamous relationship.
Yeah.
Just kind of stumbled into it.
That's so
Um,
cool.
Yeah, my relationships after that didn't follow in that pattern. And I always look back at that relationship as one that was really healthy. We were very communicative, we were very like engaging. We still have a lot of positive affection for each other and if we didn't live across the country, who knows.
Yeah.
But but yeah, so fast forward back to now, the jealousy workbook, honestly, that's something that I felt I had a handle on pretty early on. And through my partnerships, that's generally is held true. That choice, allowing the people you're with the freedom to choose. And when they, do that, it's a natural, you end up in a natural, almost secure relationship just enough from that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
later on we'll talk about the book Polysecure and attachment theory and all that. But so the jealousy workbook was one resource. The ethical slut, I think that's been talked about here before. Like so many people can say so many things about that. I read that and I was like, yes, this is the sex I want to have. Yeah,
Yeah,
let's
right?
let's do that, right? Um, and then one I held off on the 4 agreements because, I had been what I considered spiritually inert for like 10 years.
Uh-huh.
So I had like the shock paddle treatment, and the heart condition and all this, and having a child like my son looks like me, like he's almost, except for like his eye size and shape, he's my little clone. And I remember in the hospital having this experience of like seeing every family member that I've ever loved on his face.
Mm.
So that was the closest I had had to a spiritual moment. So I had a flight over to North Carolina for work or something like that, and I read the 4 agreements on a flight. It was like a 5.5 hour flight, read the whole book then. The stuff about shamanism and shamanic practicing, I was feeling like, yeah, all right, I'll take that, but let's get down to what these really are. Be impeccable with your word, make no assumptions, be excellent at everything you do, you know, um, uh, and all that. And it made sense. It
Yeah.
was kinda like some rules clicked into place of like, "Oh, wow, there's something here for me to use."
Yeah.
So, and the stuff about shamanic journeying and practicing, I kinda took in anyway because I'd been meditating since 2nd grade. I had been in martial arts in college, in high school, college, all that, and meditation was part of that, and getting into the journey state and grounding was similar to the exercises I used to do to keep my heart in check.
Uh-huh.
So so I was like, "All right, let's try some meditation. Let's do some visualization. Let's start picturing some stuff." And it ended up being a really transformational tool for me to start identifying with past trauma. So
Yeah.
what happened? Because of meeting that first poly partner, because of having that book, I had been in this state where for some years of my life I felt emotionally numb.
Mm.
And I had this very common thing where, I, as a man, as a cis male, masculine, one of the most acceptable feelings that any of us are socialized to be able to feel is anger.
Yep.
Like, given most men, and I include myself in this, pre 2019 or so, if you give a man a choice between feeling sadness, despair, depression, any number of things, we develop our own internalized shortcut to anger, you know,
Yeah.
and that's the acceptable social response.
Yeah.
You must be angry. You must defend, protect, all these things.
Sure.
And it's exacerbated because, I'm an ex-cop. So I was a police officer from 2001 to 2006. So I grew up a little bit with violence. I
Mhm.
grew up, with firearms. I carried a gun for 5 years of my life, and I have exerted violence on other people,
Yeah.
and that's I think that in right now we have so many people who are veterans. We have so many men who have come back from combat and war. We have so many people who are in law enforcement, security, and we just have a lot of people who by socialization, by culture, by choice of their own, um, you know, live in this state of protectiveness, maybe
Mm.
fear, a little bit of fear involved,
Mhm.
and anger and violence that we don't we get comfortable in that shortcut to anger, and we
Yeah.
don't let ourselves feel that full emotional spectrum.
Yeah. So much easier.
Yeah. Yeah. So what ended up happening, after reading the 4 agreements, starting to do meditation and all this, is that box of anger that I had stemmed from I had locked down and kind of started to contain it when I was 15.
Mhm.
There was an incident that happened when I was 15. It was the last time I had ever lost control of my anger. And I identified that moment, that piece, is when I boxed everything up and I started bottling things up, and everything after that point in my life just was this like numb progression of varying stages of anger. So I started to
Mm.
work with that, started to unpack it. I started to let myself feel different things.
Yeah.
What's it like to really be happy? What's it like to be sad? What's it like to feel all these things? And there's a wonderful tool. It's like an emotional wheel that has like these like big broad feelings in the center.
Like
It has
anger,
all these,
sadness,
yeah,
down to
yeah, and it has
like,
all these little nuances on the outside. Somebody has hit me that wheel, and I was just like, oh, oh my gosh, I can use this. Am I feeling angry, or am I feeling morose, or am I feeling,
uh-huh.
yeah, yeah.
It's so
And it's
good.
almost like, yeah, and when you start letting yourself feel that, like, it goes into other things, because then you can start like reading a book. What did I think about this book? I loved it. I liked it. I hated it. It made me cry. It, did all these other things. When you start looking at art, it's like, oh, wow, this is a thing of beauty. This is beautiful. This makes me joyful. And we have different expressions. We have wonderful tools at ourselves, laughing and crying. And
Mhm.
laughing and crying, I mention these things because laughter can be representative of the whole emotional spectrum at any extreme.
Yeah.
Crying can be representative of that whole spectrum, maybe not even at any extreme. I'm a crier. I will cry if I feel like emotional about something. I will cry if I'm angry at something. I will cry if So 2019 was this like thing of going back and using some of the tools from the Four Agreements and the subsequent books to go back and like unpack all that. And that is kind of what I consider the period where I really started unpacking masculinity.
Mhm.
So that led through that, and that was my first poly partner experience.
Wow. It's amazing to me how people influence, like how each of our relationships influence who we are. It's one of my favorite things about non-monogamy. When you're in a kind of a default monogamous relationship that's supposed to last forever, it's like you're also supposed to stay as this one person that doesn't ever change for the rest of your life. But like every time you interact with new people and have new relationships, you get to become something new, even if it's just with that person, or it changes a little bit with each interaction that you have. Yeah.
This goes back to that doing versus being,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Because as we in childhood we start learning, and we get asked, what job do you want to do? And it's like, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah.
And so we get this
I want to be a
concept of,
mermaid.
yeah, what label do I want to apply to myself as I get older that helps define who I become? I wanted to be a police officer. I was fortunate enough to become a police officer and live that dream and do that. And then I also left being a police officer. So when I left, I had to go through this whole thing of like, what's my life like now that I'm not? And
Who
it's a
am I?
very freeing thing when you remove a label. Because when
Yeah.
you remove a label, you have the opportunity to transform. You have the opportunity to change and acknowledge that growth. And when I look at my whole life and all that, I've changed drastically. I grew up conservative Christian. I was raised in the Southern Baptist Church from the time I was 11, all these different things. And these were labels that over time, as I let go, I was able to change and transform into something else. And that was influenced by the people around me, the culture I was in, the internet. Oh my gosh. Like for our generation, the internet was like, when that turned on, it was like the world suddenly at our fingertips.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so separating that being from doing allows us to do more, and by what we do become different. Not always
Mm,
necessarily more, but different.
yeah. Yeah. Oh. So okay, so you were a southern conservative cop, monogamous, who now runs polyamory communities, and is very non-monogamous. I am really, really curious about, you had mentioned unpacking masculinity, and now I'm really, really curious about that piece of that.
Yeah. Let me just first say, like running polyamory communities, I'll say I admin I've started during the pandemic. I started a Discord for a large Facebook group in the Bay Area,
Okay.
Bay Area polyamory.
Yeah.
Excuse
During
me.
COVID.
During COVID. So we're talking April 2020. I'm sitting at home one night. We're using like Facebook Messenger as a chat. This
Yeah.
Facebook group at the time, I think, had like 1,000, 1,100 people in it, something like that in the Bay Area. And we were all, in Facebook Messenger in one chat, and like we were losing, s- track and stuff like that. I had just left my job at Apple, where I was for 13 years, and I was about to get a job at Meta, Facebook. It was Facebook
Mm,
at the time. And so I was in between, and one night I'm sitting there and I'm like, I could start a Discord. And it's like, all right, well, so I popped in chat and I offered to start it and help out. And I kind of put together a proposal for the owner of the group. And she said, yeah, run with it. So I started up the Discord, and, I had never viewed myself in any kind of like community admin position or anything like that. What ended up happening over the next few months, like, it was a journey, because like we all started working from home. We were all at our desks, like Discord was up. And we ended up getting, like, when we topped out, I think we topped out at like 150 people in the Discord. And I was holding like weekly happy hours on Fridays, and just meeting a ton of different people that unfortunately, sadly, I don't think been able to meet many of them in real life even
yeah.
afterward. But like, just I got to see this really human experience across a broad number of polyamorous people um, through 2020. And we went through so much together. Like there were periods where like there were two times that I just broke down and I cried under my desk.
Mm,
I'm an extrovert, so like leaving the office was tough for me. It was just like, oh my gosh, like I don't have anywhere to go. I don't have people. That Discord community became my community. It became like the growth. I don't see myself as leading it. I
yeah.
see myself as maybe facilitating and helping and being a resource. And even now, like I'm very cautious of coming across as any kind of authority,
Sure.
coming across as any kind of owner, or coming across as any kind of leader. Sometimes that may happen, but I am very flawed myself. And that's one thing that like again, I just want to express, like, there is being and there's doing. And
Yeah.
sometimes in life, like we are all messy humans. And we talk about good people, bad people. We talk
Right.
about, we put labels on people. It's just, and it's like some of the worst people, sometimes end up doing something good. Some of the best people do bad things, and we are forever inundated in media of people that we put on pedestals that fall.
Yeah.
And it's like
Yeah.
unpacking masculinity, around this time, 2019, 2018, 2019, like I'm going through this holy cow emotional explosion of stuff. We also had the Me Too movement, so it's kind
Mm-hmm.
of like the Me Too movement came, and then all of a sudden, every rational man that I've ever known is suddenly like going through the backlog of every interaction that we've ever had in our lives of, where have I been shitty and misogynist?
Yeah.
Where have I been toxic? Where have I, treated somebody bad? When have I used a pejorative? When have I sexually harassed someone? When have I abused someone?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's like we all had these moments of just being real with ourselves, of, some of it is a little bit self-defensive of who's going to come out of my woodwork,
Sure.
who's going to, what skeleton is in my past closet.
Yeah.
Some of it is am I a shitty person?
Right.
And it's kind of like there's some reflection there that I think many of us had. And for me, thankfully, I didn't see too many bad things out there. I was raised by a single mom. So like one of the elements of my life has been, seeing women in positions of power and authority and being comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Seeing women as autonomous people who can make their own independent decisions. My mom didn't get married until I was like in my 20s. So like I always saw her as a single parent.
Yeah.
So you get through these things, and we go through the Me Too movement. We I'm starting to unpack, feel emotions and figure this out. And you look at, where in your life are you being shitty? Where in your life are you treating women differently, and or maybe using people, things like that. And so, I think being conscious in polyamory, where it is inherently sexual, It is inherently about relationships that transcend gender, that have traditional dynamics of there are some elements of patriarchy that exist. There's elements of toxicity, of unpacked toxicity
Right.
that come in, and there's elements of abuse that come in. I've always been careful about any kind of leadership position because one, um, I am cognizant that I am prone to mistakes. I am cognizant that I am fallible, and I will talk with you about my flaws, and I will own up to them. And I have some that I've made since. I don't want to say that like I became polyamorous in 2018, unpacked masculinity in 2019, checkbox done. I've been good ever since. That hasn't happened.
I'm golden. Follow me.
Exactly, exactly. And I would be cautious about anybody who does say that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so what I say is I am a member of the community just like anyone else, trying to figure things out just like anybody else. Don't necessarily follow me, but let's have a conversation and let's see how we can learn from each other because I'm
Mm,
still learning too.
yeah. Yeah. Always. It's like there's no end to what you can learn. There's no end to like even, a lot of my work is working with people around jealousy because I grew up and until I was like 35 was just like I'm a really jealous and possessive person. Like that was just it. That's just who I thought I was. And then I was like I'm going to be non-monogamous. I got to figure out how to work with that now.
Yeah.
But it's like
it-
even doing all of that work, it's like it's still there's always things that come up. And there's always things that like, "Oh, that's still there a little bit. Oh, there's a new thing that I didn't know would like create these feelings. Now I got to learn a whole other thing."
it is a process. It is a whole process. And you said something interesting there about possessiveness
Oh yeah.
because very much, as Americans, we are rooted in ownership. We are rooted in, we're going to have our house, we're going to have our car, we're going to have all these things that we own and
And it's
our
mine. Go get your
partners.
own.
Yeah, our partners, our spouses, they become part of that like halo of things that we own around us.
And our kids.
So, and our kids. Oh
God,
my
it's
gosh, our
wild.
kids. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. My child has let me know. He's 6 now. He lets me know continually that I do not own him. So
Oh.
it's a continuing discussion. So yeah. So 2019, I had a breakthrough. I went off into the desert and spent a weekend just unpacking that incident when I was 15. And I came back, and around the same time, I was telling my family that my wife and I were open and polyamorous. And literally the trip, I'm coming back from Sequoia National Forest. I'd been camping on my own, and my family decides to have a Skype call. So my mom had already been out. We had talked about polyamory and all this. She had let it leak out to the rest of the family. So I get on the Skype call as I'm driving through the Central Valley, and my uncle gets on. And one of my uncles gets on and he's like, I want to talk to you about this. I was like, I'm happy to talk to you about this. How about we do it when, we're on a regular call and I'm not like driving and we don't have like signal loss and stuff like that. That call ended up being fairly traumatic. My uncle ended up doing this chant of shame. Another uncle joined in, and it was just this experience of like, holy cow! Like I just came back from this like transformative experience where like I've unpacked anger and all this other stuff, and here my uncles are literally doing like the Game of Thrones scene, throwing
No.
saying chanting shame, 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 shame. And it was just I was amazed. I was shocked. I grew up with a really supportive family, and that's the first time in my life that I've ever, like, had to kind of reevaluate.
Mm.
So, I got back to San Jose, and I just sent them a message, and I was like, "Hey, right now, we can't talk. These are the conditions that we gotta put around, like, future communication, but right now, this is kind of like it. This is the way I'm gonna live my life, and we can talk about that. I can share more with you about that, but you know, this shame stuff, no, it's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen to me. It's not gonna happen around my son. It's not gonna happen around Around my spouse, like, no. Took a couple years, but I'm talking to them now, and
Yeah.
we're kind of going through that. So
Mm.
it's been interesting. So, you know, as you come out, as you become public about things like this, as you break away from those labels, the people around you will respond and change. And one of
Yeah.
the interesting things as you is like going through like the four agreements and some of that other stuff around self, around development of self, is you have to renegotiate and sometimes break those expectations of others of you, expectations of yourself of you, expectations of society and culture on you.
Mm.
Because our society and culture places a lot of things on us as men to act in a certain way, behave in a certain way, do certain things. And those are the things that we have to challenge in order to have that personal self growth,
Yeah.
whatever that's going to look like for each person.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious. I'm curious. So one of the biggest fears a lot of the people I talk to have is that like coming out to like family finding out or community finding out that they're not in the monogamous relationship that everyone thought they were, and like, oh my god, then what's going to happen? How did that feel?
You know, it was interesting because like uh I was changing physically
Hmm.
because of my heart condition. I had been through weight challenges my entire life. I grew up, you know, chubby. Like even when I was in college and then at the police academy and I was running 5 miles a day, I think the smallest I ever got was like 195 pounds. In the police academy, I was like 220. After law enforcement, I hit my heaviest of like 367 in 2010. By the time
Hmm.
I moved to California, I was at throwing out a whole bunch of numbers, but you know, I was around 300 range.
Yeah, a lot
And
of
from
fluctuation.
yeah, and from 2018 to like 2020, I got down to 235. So at this point, I'm losing a lot of weight. A lot of stuff's happening. So I was physically changing
Yeah.
because and it's interesting, you know, like before I went through this change, the clothes I wore, I didn't wear colors. I got into that like I'm gonna wear black. I'm
Hmm.
gonna wear black polos and I'm gonna wear jeans and I'm gonna wear the khakis and dockers and I'm gonna like get on this management fast track and just do the thing. And as I started feeling more myself. I wanted to express myself differently. You know, I didn't have facial hair most of my life. Of course, now you can tell I have a big beard. I didn't grow out my hair like most of my life, you know, and there's some race stuff in there because I'm part black, you know, but so I had this experience of like holding my son and watching my son grow up and the first like little curl he had come up. I was like, I cannot let him feel shame about his hair. I'm going to
Yeah.
grow my hair out. So at work, I was growing my hair out. I was changing my appearance, you know, losing weight. I was wearing colors, you know, for the first time in ever. And so there was visible things. And then when I decided to come out as polyamorous and start telling people about it, it was because thinking through that piece of how do I want to represent myself? How do I want to show up to other people?
Mm.
So it never became once I figured out that I want to live openly and I
Hmm.
want to show up as myself, as my complete self wherever I am, then that became the thing of I will pay any price for that.
Yeah.
You know, at
Yeah.
that point I was really successful in my career. I was a manager of a team. I was responsible for a lot and I came out, my boss was from Texas. He seemed okay, but like he and I, we really didn't, do too well after that.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I can't say that it was about that. Could have been about other changes. It could have been that just my general personality was different, and that kind of makes some people uncomfortable because that's the other thing. Like when you start breaking molds, when you start like challenging, when you start living differently, um and I say this as a human but also like especially as a man, when you can start having real conversations with men about other men about emotions and feelings and expressing yourself differently, there's a level of discomfort that people who are locked into that mindset
Hmm.
will naturally carry.
Yeah.
Um,
You're doing that thing
I
I'm not allowed to do.
yeah, you're breaking rules. What are you doing, man?
Yeah.
And so telling people about this is what I do, that became a natural thing. And by being willing to pay the price, like there was a conversation I was having with another tech company at one point to like be a director or something like that. As soon as I mentioned that to a buddy of mine, like who was, handling some of the negotiations with the execs, radio silence.
Mm.
And I determined then it was kind of like a director role would have been like a big jump. It would have been like, wow, that, I've made it, whatever. But I determined then if I was in a role, if I was in going to make a move for my career where I couldn't show up as my whole self to work, I couldn't show up as my complete self, I don't need that career. Like I can find other things to get into. So I was pretty thankful for that. For it ended up being a blessing. And that was part of the drive to like leave the company I'd been at for like 12, 13 years and go somewhere else. And eventually getting into the pandemic, like again, removing labels gives you freedom to transform.
Yeah. Yeah, which
Yeah.
is scary when you don't know what that's gonna look like, but I don't think it's very often that that has a bad result.
Yeah. Yeah. If I had been purely motivated by money,
Yeah.
definitely different moves.
Mhm,
But I was more motivated by living authentically to me.
mhm.
And it still turned out well. I still, have done well, thankfully.
Yeah, yeah, I love
Yeah.
that.
So, because I don't want this to be all like stars and wonderful stuff, 2018, I want to mention I met my second poly partner, made a whole ton of mistakes.
Mm,
Wonderful classics like, hey, let's bring them on our family vacation with their kid a little bit early. So, did
uh-huh.
that one.
Let's do everything together. It'll be
Yeah,
great.
yeah. Yeah, let's do some toxic stuff, Let's so that was a challenging time. That one lasted the last half of 2018. And then that ended. 2019, I met my third poly partner, fell in love, did travel, did all kinds of different things, and that was challenging. 2019, there was a lot of family counseling,
Mhm.
uh, and that was when the end of 2019 was when my wife told me that she did not want to have a romantic relationship with me.
Mm,
So it fit for what our relationship was. Thankfully, with the counselor, with the marriage counselor, we worked out what we'd been breaking down codependency,
yeah.
but we started to work out like, well, where do we meet? Where do we overlap? My wife and I live well together.
Mhm,
We enjoy living together even without a romantic relationship. We enjoy raising our child together.
mhm.
There's some things about our life where like we just, those things work well for us. We're both neurodivergent. We both uh you know uh eh, have mental health issues that we got to deal and take care of.
Sure.
So we decided to become nesting partners and co-parents.
Yeah.
And that's what we are. We're non-romantic nesting partners and co-parents. And we've been doing that since winter 2019, and we're still ticking along, and we're pretty happy this way.
I love
Yeah.
that. I love that I wish more people saw that that was an option,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
And that's the
Like you can
thing.
have
Again,
community. You can have your family.
yeah, as we break down again, breaking down our traditional concepts,
Yeah.
of what does marriage mean? And what
Yeah.
is a marriage agreement? And what does that mean? Yeah, and it's like at different times we'll check in, and we'll talk about like, well, what would it look like if we were to divorce right now? What would
Right.
our assets look like? How would we make this split if we were to do it? That's always an option.
Yeah.
And that's something I say to my wife. It's like anytime you want out, pull the eject button, we're out, and we'll figure that out, we'll work it out and we'll do what you need to do.
And that
And the
comes
same
back to
goes
the
for me.
choice that you were talking about earlier.
Exactly. It all roots from the choice. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's like I feel secure in my relationship with my wife because she has the choice to leave at any time.
Yeah.
And I look at one of the things that's happening this week. I think somewhere in maybe in Texas, there's legislation that they're looking at divorce now and making divorce more difficult. again, to remove fault from divorce. Exactly. It's another thing. So it's kind of like, institutionalizing against free will and choice is ludicrous.
Insane.
It's an absolutely terrible concept for managing a society. So, and that, by the way, is my first bid for, someday running for office. I know on here, if anything I say may be used against me in the future, and that is the first one. So,
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
I'm
So choice.
yeah. Yeah, I'm curious. Um, I'm curious about this when and I feel like this is a thing that so there's something that happens, right? You're in a romantic relationship and you're living together, and there's things that you're like, I can tolerate that because I'm in love. And this is just I've got these blinders on, right? And then as the relationship goes on and you kind of start getting annoyed by things and those blinders aren't there anymore, you're like, oh, okay, now we have to like compromise and coordinate and try and make living together work because like living with people is still living with people. Um, but what I've noticed is a lot of times people will like the if it's not a romantic relationship, then why am I putting up with these living issues or why am I putting up with these things that I otherwise wouldn't, right? And for some reason it's like if it's romantic, then it's okay, then it's worth tolerating life things, roommate issues, right? But if it's not romantic, then why would you put up with roommate issues kind of thing? I'm curious how you navigate that. How does that
Your
land?
tolerance level goes down, right?
Yeah, right?
Like the way that they may cough or sneeze suddenly becomes like grinds on your nerves with every single one. And my wife
Yeah.
is going to hear this and she's going to be like, "Shut up about my sneezing." But but I love you.
Mm.
But no, and there's things I do.
Yeah.
Absolutely things I do that I know grind her nerves. And when I say that we live well together, what I mean is like we've lived together now for almost a decade. I think we moved in together in 2011, 2012. So like we've lived together for a decade and we live well together. And after you get past NRE,
Yeah.
by the time you go through like the caretaker relationship and stuff like that, it's kind of like, all right, it's we see each other's flaws, we share some of the same flaws. Neither one of us are great housekeepers. So that's one aspect of it. So that by living well together, I mean that we make good roommates regardless.
Yeah.
And so that goes into that choice to continue living together
Mm.
because yeah, like let's take your theoretical conversation, your thing here of in monogamy land, you get involved in a relationship, you get on the relationship escalator, you move in together, you start living together, you love each other madly, the sex is great, everything's positive, but you get through NRE, but you can't stand what it's like living with this person. Like
Yeah.
they do things, they put the toilet paper roll on backward, they fold their
The
towels the
flap goes
wrong
in front.
way. Yeah, yeah. Monogamy land, it's fuck this relationship, we're gonna break up and we can't take it anymore and we get away. Polyamory land, we can say, maybe this person isn't the best nesting partner. Maybe we look at renegotiating or changing this relationship and maybe we do something else. And the other thing in non-monogamy and polyamory land that we can do is when we meet people and get in relationships and fall in love, we can say, I don't have to escalate this to living together. Like we
Mm.
can be in love, like solo polyamory people shout out, you can be in love. You can have these deeply intertwined, strong, powerful relationships and not live together.
Yeah.
And that can make just as much sense. Like one of the beautiful things. So end of 2019, beginning of 2020. I do this shamanic journey thing, and I'm like, okay, I need a framework here because I'm
Okay.
not indigenous. Like I read the four agreements. Okay, I felt kind of weird about the whole thing. What kind of spiritual framework allows me to go through and you know, move forward. Keep on doing this, work on some more of my past trauma. How can I figure out a way forward from this? I end up on I found I knew one guy 20 years ago who was learning and practicing druidry. And that guy seemed pretty cool. He seemed pretty chill. And I was kind of like, all right, well, let's take a look at this. So I went to a druid ritual that was local. I started looking at orders, talking to people. I was like, all right, druidry is going to be my framework. One of the concepts of druidry, the whole key thing is in what we call revival druidry, or is we focus on fostering love, wisdom, and creativity. I'm like, hey, cool. Here's a religious framework where I can foster love, wisdom, and creativity. The whole first year of that, what we call the Bardic grade, is studying creativity. And I say a year, it took me like 2 years to go through.
Yeah.
So 2020 to 2021, early 2022, I'm in the Bardic grade. I'm studying creativity and emotion and flow. And, I'm writing poetry and story. And I'm thinking about how I can be creative across all things. And in polyamory, we apply creativity by the relationships that we develop,
Mm.
because every relationship is an opportunity to create, what represents that bond between any two people.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, which is such a wise choice.
Yeah, but it's not really apparent, right?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't. You can go through all these things, but if you're still locked in to what our culture is, if you're still locked into like concepts of masculinity and what we're supposed to be as men,
Mm.
then you never give yourself the opportunity to explore and question these other things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So removing labels, focus on doing instead of being, giving yourself the freedom to explore and try new things and be creative with it and say, this, it's not the way it's supposed to be because there's no way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Just do it. Just
Yeah.
do what feels right for you. And that goes back into self-care. That
Uh-huh.
goes back into developing yourself as a person. So I had met this third poly partner in 2019, early 2019. Deep love. She challenged me. She exposed me to a whole lot of mindfulness things like that. We had an incredible love story. I'm not going to repeat here because one of the things that happened with that is last year, through our own development, we decided to move separate ways.
Yeah.
She moved to another city. I moved to the city. I took 2022 off from work. I was blessed enough to be able to take 2022 off from work. So I
Mm.
took a career break. I left Facebook Meta and I said, listen, I'm going to take a year. I'm just going to like live off whatever, live off investments, spend time with my son. He starts kindergarten, get us moved up to Portland where we want to live and stuff like that. Toward the end of last year, well, middle to end of last year, this partner and I had problems. We had some relationship issues and things like that. And it culminated when we were on a trip and we got into an argument out on the street. It was late at night. And I said something incredibly shitty. Said something so shitty, I can't give the context for it here, but I said something incredibly shitty that no, to my core, no version of me in their right mind would say it, but I said it. And I take ownership and accountability for saying it. And then I ended the relationship. And I ended that relationship very poorly,
Mm.
very badly. And it's something I've apologized for privately, publicly. Like there's a number of different things about the way that I ended it. But I also look back at my journals because I
Mhm.
write. And what became clear when we talk about constructing relationships, what really became clear to me, like as I was breaking down that breakup, is it's also important for us to identify when do we end relationships and how do we end them well,
Yeah.
because that can also be creativity as well. De-escalation of a relationship, transformation of a relationship, reconstructing agreements, things
Mhm.
like that. So, somewhere leading up to that, I had read the polyamory breakup book. That's another good book on breaking up.
Mhm.
I did not apply any of the lessons from that book, just to say it. And this is where I get into we're human.
Yeah.
I've done shitty things. I will continue to do shitty things. and I will continue to make mistakes. And the way I broke up and ended that relationship was a really bad way to do it. That I would not recommend for anyone. For all the work that I've done, uh, on unpacking masculinity, for everything that I've learned, for everything that I've tried and done, that one was one that I did very badly.
Mm,
Um, and I think with that, when we talk about creativity, when we talk about breaking up, when we break up with people, they don't just fall off the earth.
right.
No matter how
They don't
bad the breakup
disappear.
goes, no matter how, they still have friends, you have intertwined lives, you have friends together, you have things that you've done. Generally when people break up, they don't fall off the end of the earth. So
Hmm.
when we talk about polyamory community, especially in a town like Portland or Seattle, over time everybody knows each other. Everybody, knows somebody else who's poly or has dated somebody else, or hey, I swiped right on that person, or hey, we went out on a couple dates, figured out it wasn't the thing. That's it. So one thing I think about in terms of polyamory, in terms of creativity, and in terms of our lives and wisdom is, and I say this to other people, we are poly, and throughout our lives, we hopefully, this is the ideal, right? Hopefully, we will fall in love with many people throughout our lives, and we
Mm,
will fill our lives with love, relationships, and connection, and all these different things. So with as much importance as we place and as much attention as we place on building our dating profiles or meeting people or going out on dates, developing communication styles to build a relationship, developing communication styles to maintain a relationship, we also have to work on communication styles in de-escalating and ending a relationship, because how we go through that whole arc will kind of determine our presence and our health and our relationship with the community throughout the rest of our lives.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that that is a point where a lot of people just kind of, I'm just going to try and shut down, block. I'm gonna block the person. I'm gonna block the feelings. I'm gonna block the consequences. Let me
Yeah.
block all this. I don't want to deal with that.
And I think that's part of the thing from monogamy culture too, because like,
Hmm.
when you're monogamous, ideally that next person that you meet, the next date you're going to have, that's going to be the one you're going to ride the escalator, get married, ride off into the sunset happily ever after, and you won't have to do it again. So, in a nutshell, those relationships, become, when they end, that person becomes disposable.
Yeah.
That person becomes somebody that, screw them, not going to see them anymore. I'm going to move away, or whatever trauma happened in the relationship for both of you.
Yeah.
You end up both trying to separate and block, and there's a lot of tension around that. Polyamorous relationships, especially when you're dating other people in the community and stuff like that, and if it's a small town, they don't just vanish. And over
No.
time, you build, there's a collection of people that you've had past involvements with that like are there. So I think one thing when we talk about community and we talk about like what we're doing is how do we long term begin have relationships and end them well, acknowledging that we're all just like messy humans trying to figure things out.
Just trucking along.
Yeah.
Oh. Oh. Okay. We're coming to the end of our time, and I want to ask
Yeah.
if there's anything that you want to share that I haven't asked you.
Yeah. So to kind of cap off the story, move to Portland, get up here, and I found another admin for the Bay Area Poly Discord, and by that point I'd also become a Facebook admin, and I was helping out among all the other admins on the group. I get up here and I start looking at Facebook groups in the Pacific Northwest
Oh
for
yeah.
polyamory, and I start looking for community. I also looked on FetLife because I'm in kink and all that, and I went to my first coffee meetup. First coffee meetup I went to was pretty flat. Nobody asked my name. Nobody showed any interest. It was definitely kink focused, and it was like interesting. Second poly meetup I went to just happened to be with a wonderful group. And here I want to give a shout out to Delphine Lumen,
Oh yeah.
who was a guest on a previous show, who ran that particular coffee meetup. And I met people who I'm friends with and who I've dated and who I'm partnered with and, who I still know that essentially form the core of my poly community here. Over time, there was another person who, you know, gave me a shout out one day and was like, "Hey, how would you like to help me out with the poly chat?" So I was like, "All right, let's do this experiment. Let's do this. If I were to start a poly chat from the ground up, how would I want to do this?" And it's kind of
Mm,
like when I think of community, what do I want to do? So I started up this chat with this guy, and I told him, I'm like, I don't want to own this. Like do everything in your name. I will be an admin. I will help out, but I don't want to own. I don't want to do anything that calls me a leader. Um, but when we started putting people in, I was like, let's be bold. Let's do something different. I put in my wife, invited my wife. I put in people I had dated and stopped dating.
mhm.
I put in current partners. I put in like just everybody I knew in the poly community into this one single chat. And when you start talking about like putting your exes in a chat, it's like,
Yeah.
wow, yeah, you know, this is bold. And that was probably 3 months ago, and that's worked out. We have a thriving little private community of about 50 people who
Nice.
interact. We're starting to have events. We're starting to do stuff. And there's a lot of big Facebook groups of like 1,200, 1,500 people.
Hmm.
We have a couple of admins of those groups in the chat just because we
Yeah.
met them. But really, we've just formed a little a community of around 50, 60 people that may fluctuate, grow, things like that, that all kind of know each other, all practice polyamory kind of a similar way. We've already gone through the unicorn hunting thing and all that, and we just really strive for ethical, healthy community. Some of us have kids, some of us like to craft, stuff like that. And I think when we talk about polyamory community and building polyamory community, um, there's a saying from Druidry, and from of think globally and act locally.
Yeah.
And when if you are living somewhere where you don't have access to a lot of poly community, or you don't feel there's a lot of poly people around, and you're in a position where you can be bold and open, I encourage you to try it. Do it. Be open. Pull people together who might not otherwise talk because of the way things are supposed to be. um, Granted, there are gotchas you got to watch out for. You've got to watch out for things about abuse. You
Hmm.
have to watch out for things about anything surrounding consent violations.
Hmm.
And there are some very toxic gotchas. But what I strive for is I strive to help people feel a culture of openness and acceptance, and that
Mm,
goes back to that uh, unconditional positive regard with
yeah.
limits.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love
So
that.
I think that's the end cap. I'm settled here in Portland. My career's restarted. I'm back doing something professionally that has nothing to do with this. And like I said, I'm not selling anything. Um, I am a practicing druid. I practice druidry, again,
Sure.
labels, but um, and I've also formed helped co-found a druid seed group that again I don't own. And yeah, it's nice to be able to move somewhere new, and within a year find community, make friends, develop partnerships, and it's just being open, being authentic with yourself and with others, and you know doing the work.
Yeah.
So I encourage anybody to do the work. If there's any men out there who have been challenged, who kind of want to talk more on this stuff, like I think I gave you my Instagram link.
Yeah.
I'm open to messages, email, whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
What's your Instagram handle?
yeah, it's really original. It's Alex_Cox.
Nice.
You know,
With an X.
yeah, yeah. So
And
two
I'll put it in the
X's,
show
two
notes.
X's.
Two
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
X's. Oh, see, I've
yeah.
been writing it
Well,
wrong.
Alex is one,
Oh.
X, and then Cox is a second X.
Oh yeah.
If there
That.
was another X in there, that would just be too much. That would be triple
Okay.
X. And while I do that, that hasn't been the content of our discussion today.
Alex X. Cox.
Yeah, just Alex
When I say,
underscore
what is your
Cox.
porn name? Middle initial
Alex Cox. Yeah, that was the joke. Like middle school, a whole bunch of the kids, used to say Alex Cox, Alex Cox. And, one of the things in unpacking things is I found out, hey, I'm hetero flexible. I can, I have a little bit of flexibility there. So the joke's on them. I have suck cock. And, it's been an interesting
I
thing
love
too.
it. I love
Yeah,
it. I'll tell you,
I'm hetero romantic, but I consider myself a little bit flexible in that area.
I love
So,
that. That's so hot.
yeah.
um, I have one more question for you. And
Sure.
this one does not go on the episode that everyone is listening to, but is a
Ooh,
separate segment for my supporters of the show on Patreon, patreon.com/nonmonogamous. If anyone wants to go over there and hear
okay.
Alex's Just the Tip, which is
Just the tip.
just the tip. What is your favorite or best sex tip? I love it. That's so good. Thank you. Thank you so much for
Cool.
coming on the show.
It's been fun. It's been fun. It's been one of those things where it's like, well, this came up real quick, and it's like, if I think about it too long, I'm not going to do it. So let's do this,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and get into it.
Yeah. So good. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
coming on. I really appreciate it. This was fun. That was Alex Cox's Just the Tip. If you are one of our supporters of the show at patreon.com/notmonogamous, then you got to hear it. If you're not, go sign up so you can hear Just the Tip and all of the behind the scenes bonus stuff that I load onto Patreon. Bye.